That's it. Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmasvarupine avatar varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. Tavakatamritam. Tavakathamritam tapta jivanam kavipiritam kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimadaatatam Bhuvi Gananti Ye Puridajana. So these just struck me that we chant these Shanti mantras to start off with. And one of the things that keeps coming, Avatara Varishtaya, etc., what does it even mean? And coincidentally, this passage we picked up today, this is from the 5th of April 1884. And somehow Sam Krishna talks about it. So we'll start there. And like all passages from the Gospel of Ram Krishna, it's not one topic that he's talking about. He moves fairly freely about a whole bunch of things. And so those of us who would like to separate it out and cut it into convenient dockets, we'll have to do that. So let's start. Master to Krishna, but there is a greater manifestation of God in man. You may ask, how is it possible for God to be incarnated as a man who suffers from hunger, thirst, and other traits of an embodied being, and perhaps also from disease and grief? The reply is, even Brahman weeps entrapped in the snare of the five elements. This is actually a quotation from some passage. Panchabhutar Phade Brahmapura Kade. Anyway, this is what it means. Don't you know how Rama had to weep, stricken with grief for Sita? Further, it is said that the Lord incarnated himself as a soul in order to kill the demon Hiranyaksha. Hiranyaksha was eventually killed, but God could not go back to his abode in heaven. He enjoyed his sow's life, meaning a female pig's life. He had given, so our present President Maharaj, uh, Gautamanji, so he used to joke with us. We had joined him in Madras. He says, this is the first time somebody had discovered the gender of one of the avatars. Anyway, so I have no idea where he got this story from. Yeah, it's certainly not there in any of the standard Puranas or any place, for what it's worth. He had given birth to several young ones and was rather happy with them. The gods said among themselves, what does this mean? The Lord doesn't care to return to heaven. They all went to Shiva and laid the matter before him. Shiva came down and urged the Lord to leave the soul body and return to heaven. But the soul only suckled her young ones. Laughter. Then Shiva destroyed the soul body with his trident, and the Lord came out laughing aloud and went back to his abode. Anyway, this is a story I don't think we should take. Anyway, if somebody wants to take it seriously, they are welcome. I certainly don't. So, anyway, whatever it is. But I think the first part is important. This first line, there's a greater manifestation of God in man. So just keep a note of that and then we'll proceed. In some sense, he has just subtly hinted at what exactly he means. There's this word avatar. Let's just talk about it a bit and then we'll go on. See, basically, towards the end of his days, Sri Ramakrishna, Girish Ghosh and Ramchandra Datta, two of his close disciples, they went around saying that he is an incarnation of God, blah, 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 etc., etc. So apparently his response was not particularly pleasant. He says, one of them dissects dead bodies in a morgue. And because actually, I am pretty sure Ramchandra Datta did nothing of the kind. He was a homeopathic doctor. And the other fellow acts in a theater, and they say that this man is an incarnation of God. What do they understand of this word incarnation, etc., etc.? He says basically expressed disgust at being called an incarnation as just by calling me an incarnation as if they have made me very great. Yeah. So that's one part of the story. But again, I mean, on the other hand, Vivekananda, who had no such inclination to believe in such stuff, uh, to him, I mean, in fact, the story is that, and it's been recorded fairly authentically, Vivekananda at his during Ramakrishna's last illness when he was dying of cancer, great pain in the throat, not being able to eat anything. So Vivekananda noticed it and thought to himself that even in this state, if he says that, then I'll believe him. Yeah. So apparently, he looks at him sharply and says, "Still have doubt? He that was Ram, he that was Krishna, is now incarnated as in this body as Ramakrishna." Whatever that means, I found that statement quite mystifying, and it's kind of difficult to understand exactly what this means. So let me just say something that, so for instance, I mean, when we were brahmacharis in our training center, our vice president Maharaj, Swami Vidyanathananda he was somebody who would be teaching us ideas and ideals of the Ramakrishna order. And that's a little booklet which is composed by Vivekananda himself. And this notion had come up, and so I remember having asked him. As we keep saying or we keep hearing people say there is an incarnation, he's an avatar, blah blah blah, etc. etc. What are we supposed to understand by it? Or what do we mean by it? I mean, after all, Vivekananda himself, towards the end of his days, said that after having done practiced austerities and tapasya for a whole lifetime, I have no understanding of what this Ramakrishna was. So, what about us? I mean, what are we supposed to make of these words which keep getting thrown around? And the subtext was that it's basically some kind of superficial claim without any very much substance to it. What do we even understand by it? And so his response was, yes, that's a reasonable point. I mean, in the sense that are we to understand at the level at which either Vivekananda or Sarada Mother understood? No. But then what does it mean to us? I mean, what I mean, is it just some word? Oh, see, we keep having these expressions. I mean, oh, so and so is a. I mean, some person has come along. Oh, he's a genius. Meaningless words. Yeah. So I mean, we keep throwing out these words. I mean, it seems to be some kind of a superlative. I mean, a superlative, but more of an venting of emotion rather than containing any true conviction. Yeah. So what does it mean in practice for us? What does it translate to? It does not. I mean, it could be Christ, could be, yeah, could be Buddha, could be Rama, Krishna, whoever, Chaitanya, whatever. But what do we mean by such a thing? So when we call an individual who appears to us as human beings, yeah, I mean, this is why Sri Ramakrishna talks about this. That a person suffers, goes through all kinds of suffering through one life and so on. So when Rama weeps in the absence of Sita, he's behaving like a very ordinary human being. What's the point in worshipping such an individual human being as? And what do we even mean when we say such a thing? So his response, Swetanji's response was that, well, that's all very fine, but question which we should answer each one for ourselves is that, I mean, this is what he said. So what is your last court of appeal? Yeah. Which means basically when all reliance on other sources of strength, maybe other people, maybe individual source of strength from oneself. When all that is gone, yeah, occasionally comes, I mean, so it's a kind of sense of helplessness. Who do you go to? What is your last court of refuge? If it is an individual who one normally thinks of as a human being, then legitimately you should be in a position to call such an individual, which means basically somehow or the other there is a certain irrational, I wouldn't say irrational, irrational or pre-rational belief that when all else goes away, all other sources on which we typically depend go away, where do we go? And I mean, this really is the meaning that makes some sense in pragmatic terms, because without that, it makes no sense. Yeah, it is some kind of a meaningless superlative otherwise. So, what is our last refuge in that sense? Yeah. If, as is somewhat rare, somebody calls upon strength from within, yeah, then that person is a real Gyani. Because there is no dependence on anything outside. No family, no friends, no society, no boss, no underling. Yeah. But seeking that strength from within. Yeah. Which means, I mean, so that's basically meaning that yes, this is a situation, it has come, and one is willing to face it for with one's inner strength. That is basically the dependence on the Atman. So for such people, no God is necessary, no avatar is necessary. Yeah? But if, on the other hand, as is very frequently the case with many, it is somebody who we regard as outside of ourselves, yeah? A second person mind, or a personal being. Yeah? Look up at the heavens, for instance. Yeah. So for the second, it's a God. For the first, if it's an individual who we believe is historical or semi-historical, then that would be the real meaning of this expression. And there is another connotation here, the greater manifestation of God in man. So this is one particular thing. If there is an individual who seems to be our last refuge, that's a certain meaning. But this is the meaning of avatar or incarnation. But there is a more commonsensical meaning, which is more relevant in day to day life, in the sense that not in this kind of an exceptional situation where all dependence on one's strength is gone or all external sources of dependence are gone. What is that? And it is really here that Vivekananda drew his idea. I wouldn't call it a doctrine because it's based on a certain factual content, namely that service of human beings, greater God, manifestation of God in man, human beings. It is there that we see the greatest reflection of consciousness, in the sense that we regard ourselves as conscious. When we interact with another person, we are instinctively recognizing that person to be conscious. Can that be elevated to one of two attitudes? From the point of view of Advaita, or equivalently the Buddhist notion of service, are we recognizing the other individual with equal intrinsic abilities, intrinsic properties as ourselves? This is what is called samadarshitva, same-sightedness. This is more the knowledge aspect of things. Or accord worship. Yeah? If one is more devotionally inclined, that God which is worshipped in the temple with that same sense of devotion can we tend to individuals we interact with in day to day life. Yeah? These are the two principles, and these are basically subjective attitudes. Yeah? And I think here the crucial thing is recognizing that what we usually call God, etc., etc., the best day to day manifestation of that is the living human being in front of us. So, on the one hand, there's this doctrine of this incarnation, what it should mean in practice in day to day life to us. The second, a much more common practice, which is basically grounded on this truth that this principle of consciousness is there equally in all beings that we interact with. I mean, and basically, the fact that we are recognizing another person as a human being means at least subconsciously we are immediately recognizing that this person is as conscious a being as I am. Yeah. And it is there that the seed of non-duality is hidden. It is just bringing that seed up to fruition that is required. Okay, fine. So this was as far as this part of the story is concerned. Then he quickly switches. So there's somebody who casts him. Krishna to the master. Sir, what is the anahata sound? Master. It is a spontaneous sound constantly going on by itself. It is the sound of the pranava, Om. It originates in the supreme Brahman and is heard by yogis. People immersed in worldliness do not hear it. A yogi alone knows that this sound originates both from his navel and from the supreme Brahman resting on the ocean of milk. There's a lot of stuff behind it and it sounds very mystical. What one is hinting at here, I mean, let's try to demystify this. It's having a kind of a mystical explanation is something that's it's not an explanation. Yeah. So here's the thing, and this I'm sure is part and parcel of many of our more or less common sense experience. Sometimes we go to a place where, say, somewhere in the mountains or somewhere there's nature and there's no other sound. There's a sudden stillness, and that silence somehow speaks to you. I mean, we use these expressions, right? How is it that a kind of a conscious silence is, I mean, it's somehow pregnant with meaning? Yeah? It also happens at other instances when suddenly when we say suppose it could be even initiated by something that we are hearing as I mean say some piece of music is playing and our mind has become somehow receptive and then it's somehow quiet for a moment, for a few moments, unfortunately for us, but it somehow seems to have left an impact which is permanent. Yeah. It's basically people tell us various things, we hear various things, but it only a few things make a deep impression. Yeah. What happens is essentially that the mind has somehow become receptive and quiescent, quiet. Yeah. Two things. It's not quiet and dull. When we are sleeping, mind is quiet and dull. Or yeah, if somebody is, if we are completely unconscious, so somebody has injected us with some anesthesia, we're completely quiet. If somebody keeps makes a huge amount of noise, lorries go by at 80 decibels, I think it's going to make an impact. Yeah. Also, somebody shouts, doesn't make an impact. Yeah. But sometimes when the mind is alert, fully alert, but quiescent, a strange mixture. Yeah, alert but receptive. Yeah? And something comes in. It could be complete silence, but that silence lays this impression on the mind, which means basically that without a sound, knowledge has been communicated. Yeah? So this is literally, this is what anahata means. Yeah? Without having, usually when we create sound, it's something that is, one thing is beaten against another, and that creates a certain vibration in the atmosphere. So, for example, in vacuum, you will not have sound waves. So, it's in the absence of this kind of a normal sound generating mechanism, knowledge or something along that line, prelingual, content gets communicated. This would be literally the meaning of anahata. Yeah. Okay. I hope that is not particularly, yeah, hopefully that is sufficiently common sense. Okay, so that's the next thing. And now, the question. Ramakrishna, sir, what is the nature of the life after death? Master, Keshav Sen also asked that question. As long as a man remains ignorant, that is to say, as long as he has not realized God, so long will he be born. But after attaining knowledge, he will not have to come back to this earth or to any other plane of existence. The potter puts his pots in the sun to dry. Haven't you noticed that among them there are both baked and unbaked ones? When a cow happens to walk over them, some of the pots get broken to pieces. The broken pots that are already baked, the potter throws away, since they are of no more use to him. But the soft ones, though broken, he gathers up. He makes them into a lump, and out of this forms new pots. In the same way, so long as a man has not realized God, he will have to come back to the potter's hand. That is, he will have to be born again and again. What is the use of sowing a boiled paddy grain? It will never bring forth a shoot. Likewise, if a man is boiled in the fire of knowledge, he will not be used for new creation. He is liberated. Okay, so this is for those who are, I mean, there are people who are interested in this doctrine of reincarnation. So, what it's worth, this is what he has said. I have no understanding of it, so I shall not expose further. Okay. Okay. According to the Puranas, the Bhakta and the Bhagavan are two separate. I mean, I'm happy to for other people to chime in. Okay. According to the Puranas, the Bhakta and the Bhagavan are two separate entities. I am one, you are another. The body is a plate, as it were, containing the water of mind, intelligence, and ego. Brahman is like the sun, it is reflected in the water. Therefore, the devotee sees the divine form. It's important that he starts off with according to the Puranas. So, most of the devotional practices that are there in the Indian tradition come out of the Puranas. Yeah. Amongst the Upanishads, Shvetashvatara, which is typically regarded as a later Upanishad, yeah, there you find a combination of devotion and knowledge, whereas in the most of the other Upanishads, the thing that is stressed is more analytical inquiry, yeah, jnana. He has combined here both the Puranic tradition along with the yogic tradition. He says that in a certain place. Brahman is like the sun, it is reflected in the water. What is the water here? Mind, intelligence, ego. Yeah. In some place, Vivekananda, while describing this, he says, the reflection of this absolute consciousness, the highest reading of it by the mind is what is called, so long as the mind is regarded as a mind, the highest reading of it, highest understanding of it is the definition of the personal God. Therefore, and that's why he has these lectures on Maya. One of them is Maya and the evolution of the concept of God. Yeah? So, for instance, old in ancient times when human beings had just organized themselves as tribes, what was their notion of a personal god? In various places, you have these things like totem poles, etc., etc. And some of those notions of a god were pretty violent, right? I mean, they liked blood and gore and sometimes other human being sacrifice. Not particularly pleasant to think of. Yeah. On the other hand, I mean, well, that's the maximum that they could conceive of. Presumably, we have come a little distance from there. Yeah. I mean, we have larger societies, so we are forced to bear with larger groups of people. So anyway, I mean, as human beings' minds evolve and can conceive of a greater and greater reality, greater and greater idea, so this notion of a personal God evolves, and the notion of a personal God, therefore, is dependent on what culture one is born into, and the strife and fighting basically between groups of people saying that no, my god called X is the greatest god and my god called Y is the greatest god. It's essentially tribalism with lots of plastering. Yeah. And the problem really is that we are really thinking of ourselves as those ancient tribes who used to sacrifice other human beings in front of totem poles. It's that same thing covered up and packaged in some mildly acceptable language to oneself, not acceptable to the person who is being killed, of course. I mean, so that's what it is. And then, I mean, but if one can actually try to broaden it a little bit to basically accept all human beings as a, I mean, kind of a part of a larger family, more broadly, even all living beings. Yeah. And then recognize that this God, this personal God, is really that which is there in each of these things, even more generally in all that exists. Then one is moving to, well, as far as human understanding today is concerned, to perhaps a broader and more accepting and a more universal idea of a personal God. In fact, um, this Vedanta Sara, it essentially, so that's a Vedanta book. Yeah. So they also give a notion of, I mean, these various traditions have different ideas of a God. So for example, those who feel that this word Ishvara, yeah, this is a concept. Yeah. What is it? It comes from Ishate, rulership. That which rules everything is called uh, Ishvara. Yeah. So at a certain point of time, human societies had kings. Yeah. So who is the king of kings is Ishvara. Here, actually, well, there's a story which is actually rather nice, so I might as well tell you. So there's this one famous classical singer called Tansen, Nia Tansen, who was supposed to have been essentially the founder of all more, I mean, what is extant today as Indian classical music. All of it owes itself to Tansen in some sense. Yeah? It's supposed to have come from him. So Tansen used to be the court musician in the court of uh, one Mughal emperor, Akbar. Yeah? So Akbar once asked him, so Tansen, you are such a great singer. How much, what would your guru, I mean, what would your teacher who taught you music have been like? So, can you take me along and let me hear his singing? So, apparently, Tansen's guru was somebody called Haridas Thakur. Anyway, so Tansen said that yes, I can take you along and you can listen to him, but you'll have to do exactly what I tell you to do, because otherwise if I mean, he's whimsical and might or might not sing for you. He says, okay, that's fine, do what you say. So Tansen takes him along. This person used to live somewhere in isolation in some forest, takes him along and tells the king, shows him some bush. He says, you hide here, don't move around, don't make any noise, just hide here. The king wanted to listen to this great singer, so he sat there. So Tansen went along to his teacher, and then so his teacher asked him, "So I believe you have now become a court musician, famous, etc., etc." He said, "Yes, that is true, but there is this one particular raga, probably Todi, you had taught me, which I have some doubts about it." So then his teacher says, "All right, why don't you sing it?" So Tansen sang and basically on purpose made a couple of mistakes. So then Guru got a little annoyed. He says, "Is this what I had taught you?" Yes, yes, that is why I have come to you. Can you sing it for me? So then the Guru started singing. So after he had finished his singing, then Tansen says, "Yes, I wanted to listen to you, but more importantly, the emperor has come. He is hiding in a bush. I had told him that you would not sing for him. So then he says, "Oh, so then Akbar came along and he was, yes, because of, so this is why he made this ploy so that I could listen to you sing." So then the Guru said, "Yeah, he's a smart guy. He knew that if he had told me that you had come and I have to sing for you, I wouldn't have." So then the emperor went back, and then apparently after going back to court, Akbar now tells Tansen, "Tansen, after listening to your Guru sing, I somehow sense I can't find it's something intangible, but there is a gulf of difference. So, what exactly is it? Because you sing the same notes." So then Tansen Singh says, "Yeah, of course there is a difference. I sing for my king, which is you, but he sings only for the king of kings. So there is a difference." Anyway, so that's a story to explain what this Ishvara. I mean, Ishvara, this is a word. Yeah. Similarly, all these words, Vishnu. Yeah. Vishnu does not mean this four-armed, and literally does not mean some fellow with holding XYZ in his four hands and legs. Yeah. Literally, the word means from this Vishana. Yeah. So Vishanath Vishnu. That's the meaning of it. It means basically all pervasiveness. Yeah. So consciousness that is all pervasive is called Vishnu. Yeah? So it's a name. Yeah? It's an idea. It's a concept. It's an expanded concept. So in all of Vedanta, you will see that there is some idea that is imposed on consciousness. This idea imposed is called an upadhi. Yeah? It's an idea. Yeah? And so it's a reading of consciousness by the mind using some kind of an elevated idea. So, all pervasiveness, once you use that to limit, all pervasiveness mind being used to limit consciousness. Consciousness is unqualified. Yeah? Then, when you use this idea to package it, to define it, then that is called Vishnu. When you use the idea of all rulership, that's called Ishvara, etc., etc. Yeah? So, yeah. So similarly, I mean, I think the in fact in this Vedanta Sara, which is where we started, this basically says that when you have consciousness qualified by the individual body and mind, that is what is called jiva. Yeah? This is vyashti. Yeah? Vyashti means vishesha, specific. Yeah? But the same thing when you say samashti. Yeah? So this is a Vedanta is basically identifying this idea of Vishnu with Ishvara. It's basically samashti avachinna chaita. Samashti means all that exists. Yeah? So consciousness qualified by all that exists. That is called Ishvara in Vedanta. Yeah. So thinking of, so basically then if that idea really sinks in, then all that we see around us without being divided up into, this is a laptop, this is a table, this is that, this is a person I like, this is a person I dislike, blah, blah, blah. All these qualifications, once they are removed, then it is really what the practice of Vedanta becomes in day-to-day life. Yeah? It means basically whatever this idea, this is really all that is. Yeah? And this is what really the notion of God is supposed to be, not somebody sitting in some heaven wearing a white beard, blah blah blah. So not some imaginary idea, but something that is very tangible, as tangible as possible. Okay, good. So this is started off with this idea of bhakti, and now he comes to Vedanta. According to the Vedanta, Brahman alone is real, and all else is Maya, dreamlike and unsubstantial. The ego, like a stick, lies across the ocean of Satchidananda. To M, author. Listen to what I am saying. When this ego is taken away, there remains only one undivided ocean of Satchidananda. But as long as the stick of ego remains, there is an appearance of two. Here is one part of the water, and there another part. Attaining the knowledge of Brahman, one is established in Samadhi when the ego is effaced. Here, according to Vedanta, basically this ego is defined as ahankara. So aham karoti, it's not what we usually refer to as, oh, that fellow is very egotistic, blah, blah, blah. That's essentially we are misusing the word. Yeah, that is what we are really referring to is arrogance, or somebody who tries to prove himself or herself superior to the rest of them. That's not what is the technical definition. I mean, precise thing. It's basically Vedanta defines it as chit jad granthi. So that means this confusion between the conscious principle in us and the unconscious principle in us, which means basically nobody will say that my nail is a conscious. I mean, I won't regard my nail as something that's a conscious being. Yeah? So it's my perception which regards my eye as conscious, and the rest of it, the body, mind, blah, 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 as not particularly conscious. The confusion between these, when I am saying, who am I will say, oh, I am this confusion between this conscious principle and this unconscious. This confusion, this granthi, so it's basically as if it's two are tied together. This knot which ties the conscious principle with the unconscious, that's exactly what individuates. And then when you're tied to an unconscious, you're not tied to the unconscious as meaning in the sense of the whole world. Yeah? That feeling of I am is tied to some part of matter localized in time and space. Yeah? That localization of consciousness, specific to this body and mind, is exactly what is called ahankara. Without that, the notion of I does not make sense. And therefore, there is this me, which is really behind this body, mind, blah, blah, blah. And there is the rest, which is the world. Yeah. So that means this principle of duality, I am something different, and the world is something different. Yeah. This principle of duality, this is really what is ahankara. Can this be effaced? And so when that goes away, this stick, otherwise, in the absence of this, it is how can one get to it? It's basically saying, okay, so the world exists, and when we start introspecting, world exists to whom? The one solid thing that we can say the world exists to me, but then what is this? And once we start understanding that there is this one undivided principle of consciousness, which in part is getting reflected as the world and in part is getting reflected as the mind and body, then that becomes the substratum of both the subject and the object. The principle of division between these two removed is what is being referred to as knowledge. Yeah? Even in day to day life, when we say that something we have acquired knowledge of something, what really do we mean? Psychologically, what has happened? We've trained our mind on something that is read and that is being read. And at some point of time, I mean, if suppose my mind is befuddled, I can keep on reading one line and without getting what it is trying to say. And then suddenly, somehow or the other, it some flashes forth. What has happened? is that this principle, I mean, somehow there is a content there, there's a content here, and the division has removed. This is the way Vedanta talks of, this is the theory of epistemology, flashing of knowledge, Khyati is what it's called. How knowledge flashes in the individual mind. Yeah? It is not something that you can say is caught within the framework of causality. Because you can try for 5 minutes one day and something happens and it springs forth. Another day it can be a few seconds. Another it can be a whole day you strain and nothing happens. Yeah. So it's not really caught in this framework of causality. Yeah? And therefore, this flash of knowledge that happens, and it's happening to us every moment of our existence, is really where this higher aspirations could be hunted for. Okay. But Shankaracharya retained the ego of knowledge in order to teach men, to Pran Krishna. But there are signs that distinguish the man of knowledge. Some people think they have knowledge. What are the characteristics of knowledge? A jnani cannot injure anybody. He becomes like a child. If a steel sword touches the philosopher's stone, it is transformed into gold. Gold can never cut. It may seem from the outside that a jnani also has anger or egotism, but in reality, he has no such thing. From a distance, a burnt string lying on the ground may look like a real one, but if you come near and blow at it, it disappears altogether. The anger and egotism of a jnani are mere appearances, they are not real. A child has no attachment. He makes a playhouse, and if anyone touches it, he will jump about and cry. The next moment, he himself will break it. This moment, he may be very attached to his cloth. He says, "My daddy has given it to me, I won't part with it." But the next moment, you can cajole him away from it with a toy. He will go away with you, leaving the cloth behind. These are the characteristics of a jnani. Perhaps he has many luxuries at home, couch, chairs, paintings, and equipage, but any day he may leave all these and go off to Benares. According to Vedanta, the waking state too is unreal. Once a woodcutter lay dreaming when someone woke him up. Greatly annoyed, he said, "Why have you disturbed my sleep? I was dreaming that I was a king and the father of 7 children. The princes were come." Clearly, this was before the world population was 8 billion. "The princes were becoming well versed in letters and military arts. I was secure on my throne and ruled over my subjects. Why have you demolished my world of joy?" "Well, that was a mere dream," said the other man. "Why should that bother you?" "Fool," said the woodcutter, "you don't understand. My becoming a king in the dream was just as real as is my being a woodcutter. If being a woodcutter is real, then being a king in a dream is real also." So I'll just tell one story and then we'll open up for questions. Yeah. So this is really about our previous president, Swami Smaranaji. Yeah. So this is we've seen this many times. That's why. So basically, sometimes he would show that he's very angry. But those of us who had known him long knew that this was just some appearance, and we just have to wait, and then he would start feeling very bad about showing anger. So once he was in charge of it, he was in charge of Madras Center long back in the early 90s. I've heard this. So some young monk had made some mistake while doing some document, preparing some document, and he had called him, and he was supposed to look at him and scold him and basically tell him off. So this young person came along pretty scared, and he says, took this piece of paper. "Is this the way to write something?" And then he threw it at him. essentially to demonstrate that he was really annoyed. The paper went, hit the edge of the table and fell on the floor. He said, "Oh, hey, this paper has fallen down." And you went and brought it up. And this is Thakur's paper, Sri Ramakrishna's piece of paper that has fallen down. Immediately brought it up and started wiping it off on his own body. And then he said, "Oh, yes, yes, now you can take it." So immediately, I mean, you could, that person later said, "See, this is how he was trying to show his anger, but then by mistake the paper fell. And immediately it was gone." And I've seen this myself. I was telling one of you yesterday. So when he was vice president, yeah, he had gone to one of the temples for his usual evening rounds. He had done to do pranam, and I was there, and I wanted to do salute him. I said, "No, don't do that now." So he gave me a reprimand and moved me off. And then I was generally standing there for him to come back. He said, "See, if you do it now, there'll be a big crowd." I said, "No, it's okay." I said, yeah, so basically it was for very pragmatic reasons. But I knew him for when I had known him since before joining. So I knew this was maybe around 2015, 14, thereabouts. So known each other for almost 20 years then. So I knew that, yeah, he'll say something somewhat brusquely, and then immediately after that, he'll start feeling bad. Then he'll come. And invariably, that's what used to happen. So, anyway, so it was clear. I mean, in this I think we shared some of our reminiscences about him. But, I mean, two things that have been mentioned here. One, incapable of being violent, incapable of real violence, hurting other people. One. Simultaneously, this intense commitment to truth above everything else. Yeah. So these were there in that individual, and it's really a great good fortune that we seen such people who basically without that truth remains something abstract, non-violence remains something abstract, and it's really when it's demonstrated in life by an individual that we realize that these are things not just to be read in books, not something abstract to be memorized and chanted, or even like our mantra, whatever. These are something that actually mean what human existence is about. And that brings back to our first thing that it is in such people that we find a manifestation of what we call God. Okay, so that's as far as this is concerned. Now we'll open it up and you can say what you want about it. I think there's one particular topic I have consciously avoided commenting about. Anyway, yes. Yes, please.
जो basic लोग मिले हैं.
No, please speak in English. Not
Oh,
everybody
English,
else.
sorry. When we find someone like this, why don't we all like? Why doesn't everyone just go to the mountains or something, meditate and find?
When we find someone like this, meaning?
Someone who you just talked about, demonstrating when it's you see it in real life.
Yeah, but he did not go to the mountains to get to this.
No, of course you don't have to, but I'm just
Yeah.
saying, like, is that something that, if you see someone like this, should you follow them to the mountains?
Of course not.
No.
Of course not. See, each person has to grow in his or her own way. So, which means that does one become? I mean, see, this person who we've seen inspires. Yeah, that means there's a certain quality we detect, but just by looking at that and understanding it, I suddenly won't get 1 kilo of dedication to knowledge and another half kilo of nonviolence and compassion, right? It's something that has to be cultivated. How does one cultivate it? Certainly, meditation is one way. Yeah? But as we were saying, that the best laboratory is this body and mind in which we have to cultivate it. External props include the world as we know it. We have to start where we are. Suppose I go off to the mountains, yeah? But suppose somebody is a musician, just goes off to the mountains without the instrument of playing that music. Do you think it would help such a person? Or would it much rather be that in and through that playing of music, which automatically elevates his mind, that person? So you have to detect your own strengths first and play to your strengths. For that, one has to decide. Yeah, it's not that your environment will always be suitable, but in and through whatever situation you are in, try to get it. Yeah? Yes, please.
Maharaj, after listening to this, one thought came that yes, we meet very elevated souls. We are lucky that we're associated with sadhus, sannyasis. Not everyone is, but a very important factor in lifting a human, I think, beyond just being, an animal status, very deep love.
Ah, yes, wonderful.
And when we are kids, our relation with our parents are more of dependence.
Yes,
They're going to
true.
take care of us. When we're in our teens, there's a selfishness and a demand.
Yeah.
And then there comes a time when they grow old,
Yes.
and then that love that comes in us, if it does,
Yes.
to serve them unconditionally or to even be ready to
Absolutely.
sacrifice your whole life for them,
Yes.
you
Absolutely.
see God in your parents at that time.
Absolutely.
And eventually they die,
Yeah.
but you realize one day that in that moment you were lifted up beyond your
Absolutely.
selfishness, beyond
Absolutely.
everything.
Absolutely.
In life, you may still have that great likes, dislikes, human weaknesses, everything.
Yeah.
But that
So here is
ability to love,
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. So and then this really is what it is, because this is a this is a concrete instance where you understand that you are capable of unconditional love, and that unconditional love, which is also called unselfishness, yeah, is exactly what it is about. But if you have had a taste of it, then it can be cultivated, because then you understand this is really what gives oneself that conviction that this is not something abstract, because you have experienced it in a very real tangible sense, but can it be cultivated in day to day sense? Yeah, so that was an instance which brought it out. Yeah. But what our other practices, yeah, in terms of work, in terms of meditation, you can meditate on that. Yeah. Because then that you recognize that, okay, this is my real inner nature. Yeah. And then meditating on that and cultivating it. Yeah. See, for example, I mean, when the Buddhists talk about metta meditation, or this yogis talk about Maitri Karuna, yeah, this is exactly what one is trying to do. Yes, please.
Swamiji, you mentioned God as in the form of an idea or a concept.
Yeah.
So, but when it comes to this concept that you mentioned, and then God being given a form, like let's say Bhagavan taking 10 avatars as per Bhagavatam, or like
Yes.
all the different avatars, like let's say Varahi, or as Rama, or Krishna, or Vishnu, all that.
Vishnu was an avatar.
Sorry?
Was Vishnu? This is supposed to be Vishnu's avatar,
Yeah,
right?
Vishnu, sorry, as Ram,
Okay,
Rama
fine.
or Krishna as Vishnu's avatars, or like in Bhagavatam as per all the Dashavatars that we read about.
Yeah.
So are they still concepts, or are they something that have happened? Because
As I said, the pragmatic thing is not to get. I mean, okay. If you ask me, are you asking my personal opinion or what is said in various written places which I've memorized and I can tell you? Which one do you want? Do you want a scriptural answer or an honest answer?
honest one, because
Then honest answer. The honest answer is very simple. The honest answer is very simple. If you are, if in your personal life, that answer is what we talked about. If in your personal life, you have found some personal God in the form of a human being, yeah? Might be historical, might be just somebody with a human form whose historicity might be doubtful. Yeah? But you feel that this individual human being, with all the things, stories that you have read and which have left an impact, is somebody who you can go to and feel elevated. And most importantly, in hours of complete helplessness, this is the one refuge you have. That is the avatar.
Then that's not a concept, right? That's an existence.
What do you mean it's an existence?
So
A
suppose you're
concept,
saying,
a concept does not exist.
let's say if you are my go-to
Ah,
person,
what do I have to do to not be that?
so when you
I
go,
would make some completely ridiculous statements and then yeah. So suppose there is some such person. I'm talking about not an so what. Who would one go to? Why I told you Swami Vidyanathananda's answer. What does it mean? What does saying somebody is an avatar, blah 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 mean? Is it this memorized passages from Bhagavatam? In Bhagavatam, it makes all kinds of ridiculous assertions. Now I'm giving you my honest answer. Ridiculous assertions like Buddha was incarnated in order to fool the demons. Vivekananda criticizes that this is the kind of ridiculous nonsense, parochial, what is it, bigoted nonsense that they have talked about. Vivekananda was not somebody who minced his words. Yeah, so then are we going to talk about Buddha in this kind of derogatory terms because somebody wanted to form a tribe? No. So then that's what I'm saying, that Bhagavatam is in some parts of it highly sectarian. Yeah. So that's not the authority. The authority is your personal conviction. What do you do? Yeah? That could be anybody. Yeah? And whatever you feel, see, there it's your subjective feeling at a moment of, say, so suppose there's some great, it could be even great joy you feel and you want to share, and there is nobody to share with. Somehow or the other, deep inside you feel nobody is going to understand what this deep welling of joy is. And then you go and there's some individual, maybe in a human form, yeah, maybe not living, maybe dead, maybe imaginary, but still you go on. That would be the incarnation. Okay, good. Hopefully, yeah, that answers your question.
yeah, it does.
Very good. Yeah, we have I think one more minute. So, anybody else? If not, we can hold close out.
Maybe sorry, then I will ask.
Yes, please. आप वेदांत से पूछिए.
Vedanta.
Yeah, good.
Based on Vedanta,
Yes, please.
where we can fit the Ishwar like within our insight as a Ishwar, like Jiva, Ishwar, and then consciousness. So where we can fit the Ishwar.
So here is the point. So long as we recognize ourselves as limited individual beings, there is the world and the all. Yes, all that exists. And I exist and I am part and parcel of this all that exists. Yes. Then consciousness reflected in this confusion that I call I is the Jiva. Consciousness reflected in all that exists is this Ishvara. And consciousness alone, in which I as an individual, in which all of this as Ishvara exists, is Brahma.
But that also is within the oneself, because
Right.
it's not two anyways, so that's also Ishwar.
No, then there is no oneself and the other. That difference gone. So therefore, in some other place in the Kathamrita, Sri Ramakrishna says that you cannot even talk about it as existent versus non-existent. All duality. All duality. Asti nasti pare. Beyond existence and non-existence. Because these are also finally fundamental concepts. And as soon as you have, say, something which is existent, you have its opposite, something which is non-existent. Still in the domain of duality. Thank you for that question. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu Jananing Saradang Deving Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami. End stream.